chemical object uh, on the beach there. That's okay. It's not a question and answer presentation, really. So that's a something that I saw on the shore of Joshua's Pond, one of the cleanest ponds that we have on Cape Cod. That's used in a kind of a suburban area. Anyway, I'm pleased to be able to talk to you tonight about PFAS. I first encountered the idea of PFAS from the work of Laurel Shader and her work at Silent Spring Institute, and that was when she sampled the public water supply wells in about 2009, and this chemical came up, which was PFAS, which we didn't really know much about, other than that it was not exceeding the health threshold at that time. So no labs were doing that kind of work. They were all kind of academic labs, and so I was the manager of the groundwater cleanup at the Fire Training Academy since 1988, and I knew that the PFAS was associated with aqueous film forming foam, or AFFF, that is used by firefighters to put out petroleum fires. But anyway, no commercial lab was available till about 2013, when I first took my first samples of that. And so since 2013, it's been a whirlwind of different activities, of learning, of growing response from the state and the feds. And so I'll just begin my talk and share that. Thought I would share that intro with you. I'm going to just talk about the PFAS, what we know about it in the Hyannis area. It involves two major point sources of contamination, and we'll see what the consequences of its being released to the environment has been, and kind of what has been done to deal with it. So I always begin my talks, because I'm a hydrogeologist, with a little background on the sole source aquifer. And the sole source aquifer that you see there is the water table contours and feet above mean sea level. It's our only source of water. We have 6 separate lenses, and it feeds our fresh kettle hole ponds and discharges to marine embayments. And every once in a while, the EPA does a sole source aquifer review, which they just finished up on the machine gun range. And quite a few, maybe a handful of those types of sole source aquifer reviews have been done by EPA. So anyway, that is, so the area that we're going to be talking about, as I think you can all see my cursor, is the Mid-Cape area here at the end of what we call the Sagamore lens. And we go further out, the Monomoy lens, Nauset lens, Chequesset lens, Pamet lens, and the Pilgrim lens, where the Pilgrims first landed in 1620. So this is a map of Cape Cod. All the black dots are public water supply wells, and they feed our thirst and irrigation needs. And we pump over 10 billion gallons a year. And there's over 130 of these wells all across Cape Cod. And the pink areas are the wellhead protection areas that have been adopted by the towns and through state regulations to protect the water quality that we have in these wells. And for many years, I've always said the Cape has excellent wells without treatment, but things are changing. Today, I'm going to talk about our case study here in the Mid-Cape area. And what you see there is 3 marks for the Fire Training Academy, which you see is upgradient of some supply wells, the airport, which is upgradient of some supply wells, And a major player in Hyannis is the water pollution control facility. It's not a direct source, and I'll explain that as we go. So here's a water table map of the area from a computer model that I'm presently working on for Silent Spring. And what we see are the water table contours in feet above mean sea level. And the 1 foot contours go from 0 all the way up to 35 feet. Okay. I'm hearing a echo. I hope that's not me, because I'm not sure how to fix it. The sites that we're going to take a look at more closely is the Fire Training Academy and the airport. And these are public water supply wells in the dots that you see here through Hyannis, and these are the Yarmouth wells over here. Kind of interesting for people from Yarmouth is that the source of water can be delineated by the groundwater travel at right angles to these contours. So a lot of the recharge to these Yarmouth wells comes from higher up and to the east of the aquifer versus this area here where we have the Hyannis wells. There are some arrows showing the typical groundwater flow directions that occur at right angles to those contours. And that's basically what I wanted to show by that, nothing more particular. So this is an aerial of the Barnstable Fire Training Academy as it looked back in the 1970s. You see all kinds of burn pits where they burn petroleum and things like that, and they put it out with water, and then they also put it out with foam. And it was a place that many of all the local firefighter departments came to train, and it served a very important purpose for many years. I got involved in 1986 when petroleum hydrocarbons, or number 2 diesel fuel, was found in the groundwater, not surprisingly. Here's a depiction of some of the work that I was involved with. This was about the extent of the petroleum plume in 1980, and that was cleaned up. But at the same time, we had a chloroform plume that came in from the Cape Cod potato chip factory that was not sewered at that time, and they were using a compound that was chloroform for testing purposes. It was less than I understand than 2 gallons worth over a period of time, but it knocked out Barnstable Fire District wells and was on its way to the Mary Dunn wells before we stopped it. So anyway, those were cleaned up, and now there's some residual petroleum there. It doesn't serve any risk, and I'm not sure what the status of that is, because the county really hasn't closed out that petroleum spill. There was an MTBE spill. You used to buy gasoline and it had MTBE in it. It was a component and an oxygen for gasoline. They've done away with it, and that's why we have ethanol now. But it was in there long enough that it was spilled at the Fire Training Academy, and that had to be cleaned up. And then in 2007, there was perchlorate plume that was the result of using marine flares for lighting fires of straw at that time. So we had this large perchlorate plume. So anyway, that was cleaned up. And then 2013, when I took my first sample, we encountered PFAS. And so that's the story of this facility. And now I'm glad to report that in 2019, the county closed and ceased all fire training activities at the site. Here's some historic photos of fire training using foam. We see a 1958 inaugural here at the training academy with the airport system there, and some more recent ones over here. These are vintage photos from 1956, where they'd have a whole kind of a jamboree of firefighters, and they'd all go to the airport and put out fires and train with the water foam or what they had at the time. So let me just give you a little background on aqueous film forming foam. That's what we're going to be talking about. AFFF contains high concentrations of all kinds of PFAS compounds, but we typically see the compounds PFOS, and then there's another one that's we don't normally talk about. It's a 6,2 fluorotelmer. The PFOS has a very, very low threshold for regulations for drinking water, and the 6,2 does not have one. But you can tell the differences between the different foams by the analysis, and we call it fingerprinting or doing forensics and things like that to discern what source came from which area. So PFAS is also contained in numerous consumer products and is ubiquitous in the environment. For those who've heard, you know, you can find PFAS in the blood of mammals in the Arctic and in the deep sea. And it's basically in all our blood. Human health blood serum has been tested, and we find it everywhere in our blood. At much higher levels in areas that have high levels of. And the regulatory levels are getting lower and lower all the time. When we first started this with Laurel back in 2009, the level was 200 for PFOS. And then in 2016, 70 for PFOS. In 2018, 20 for PFOS, and any combination of the presence of any one of these, we call it the sum of PFAS, sum of 6 compounds, PFAS 6. And now EPA has on the table a level of 4 nanograms per liter. Nanograms, what's that? That's parts per trillion. Parts per trillion, very, very low. And in surface waters, there's really no state standards for human exposure to surface water presently. Mass DEP has a reportable concentration requirement. So if you found it in a surface water and it was above 500,000 nanograms, that would be a reportable concentration. You'd have to report it to DEP, and action would have to be taken. There are advisories, though, for fishing, and they have been issued by the Department of Public Health for ponds where they have detected PFAS at a lot lower concentrations than this, because PFAS will accumulate in the fish tissue, and so they basically put an advisory on that you shouldn't be eating fish from this pond because that has PFAS in it. So let's get back to the Fire Training Academy, and now that you know a little bit about PFAS, when this map was put together, the level was 70. And so what we found here was concentrations of in the 100,000s actually, and this you know, in this at the source of the area, and this red contour is about 2,000. And so the PFAS is gets into the groundwater, goes down gradient, and these are several of the public water supply wells for the town of Barnstable. That's the Mary Dunn well field, and the reaction of as soon as it was found out that PFAS was in it, the town closed down these wells, and so that was the first initial action. And then in 2015, really when we just about were on the first step of the learning curve on this, the town of Barnstable took an extraordinary step of providing treatment immediately on these 2 first impacted wells. They sued the county. They got money from the county to help pay for it, and so it was a very proactive step that was taken by the DPW superintendent Dan Santos at the time, and he continues to be kind of in the forefront of this PFAS issue with Mark Els. They get tagged a lot by people across the state and potentially the nation about how to deal with PFAS in your water supply wells and in your area. So I was going to jump now to the airport. The airport has, this is a map of the airport, and there's a lot going on here. the runways, and these are delineated plumes of PFAS 6, the sum of the 6 PFAS compounds that are emanating from an area called the deployment area, which is one of the key areas where they used to train with uh, aqueous film forming a foam, or AFFF. And then this was the garage here where everything was stored and gathered and put back and cleaned and so on and so forth. So this is an area of PFAS contamination from the airport. It's kind of hard to see, but I think this is one of the highest concentrations here. But they also had this issue with the 6,2-fluorotelomere that they used as a signature, and using that as a signature, they maintained that their activities for 30 some odd years had not gotten to the Mar wells, and that it's actually just getting there now. I mean, that's kind of debatable from my perspective, but this is that been but they've used that, and there is impact at the wells. They're taking steps to deal with that, as I'll tell you in a little bit. So these are the Mar wells, the ME1, 2, and 3 wells that are located down gradient of the source areas, or the detected source areas on the airport. The airport's a big facility, so they did a lot of drilling, a lot of investigation. And they wanted to make sure that we knew that the fire training academy is up here. So here's the fire training academy coming down here to the Mary Dunn wells, and then the Mar wells over here. Much like the reaction to the Mary Dunn wells, the town of Barnstable moved very quickly, actually, for the type of problem that they had there, because they not only had PFAS, but they had 1,4-dioxane. And this new treatment plant became operational in 2020 at a cost of $12 million. And presently, all 11 of the Hyannis area public water supply wells are treated, and the drinking water is clean. This is an aerial of the new $12 million treatment system with the storage tower, and in the background you can see the airport, and that it's not really that far from where the wells are located along this area, wells 1, 3, 2. So let's talk about the water system here in Hyannis. The map shows the Mary Dunn wells, the Mar wells. You got Route 28 coming up through here through the airport rotary. And then there's the 4 wells down here, the Straightway wells, Simmons Pond, and Hyannis Port wells, or the kind of the Hyannis Port type wells. And the water distribution, they pump about 2.1 million gallons per day. It's 82% residential and 27% commercial. And they did some work, obviously, because they were really stressed out with having to close wells and put treatment on, to look at their total needs. And they said, well, we need more water. And so the water supply division of Barnstable, led by the supervisor Hans Kaiser, undertaken a number of studies to evaluate future water supply sites throughout the town. And because of the issue with PFAS, he said, well, we have to come up with some system. How do we know where PFAS is and where it isn't? We know we've got a lot of PFAS that we're dealing with at the fire training academy and the airport. Where else is it potentially located? So we came up with this idea that, it's very expensive to put in monitoring wells anywhere. We just put in 2 wells in Katuitt last week for $7,000, and they were kind of shallow. And Barnstable is a big town to go looking for something that you don't know it's not there. But the ponds are fairly accessible, and the ponds are flow-through ponds. Groundwater flows through the ponds from one up gradient side, as the diagram shows, and sits in the pond for a while and then gets discharged back into the aquifer. So the ponds are windows on the aquifer. And so if you find out kind of how the pond is doing in regards to PFAS, you'll have a pretty good idea of what's in the groundwater around it. So that's a program that we embarked on. And we selected about 21 ponds throughout the town. And this work was done through the Water Supply Division for the DPW back in 2020. And these were the ponds, and so we had to go out and take the samples, and so we went out to the middle of the ponds with a vessel to take the samples that it would be representative. You know, the samples at that time were, I don't know, I think they were like $350 per sample, so it wasn't a cheap kind of. It wasn't um, it was a costly type of project, and you couldn't get too carried away. But anyway, a single sample in the middle of the pond would reflect what the water quality is in the water column, and would tell us if there is PFAS getting in the vicinity of the area through the groundwater. So here's the results of our work that we did. And these are the levels of PFAS that we found in the ponds. And you see that there's levels, and I'll show you more the actual levels on a chart in a second. But you know, over 100 nanograms per liter total PFAS are in these ponds over here, and then and so you can actually see the legend over here. So the 20 is presently the level of concern for drinking water regulations, right? So anywhere that's yellow or blue is okay, and then as we go further up, we're getting into some trouble here. And so I described these areas as in several tiers. This is a tier 3 area where the levels are fairly low, basically in the western part of town. We have area that is really high in the Hyannis area, and then we have an area that's kind of in between in the area that's kind of skirts the outskirts of Hyannis and heading out into Centerville. So what we found was these are the ponds, and I've divided these up into the tiers. So we have the tier 1 ponds here, and the tier 2 ponds, and the tier 3 ponds. So if we look at the average of the PFAS, where we find the tier 1 ponds were very high, about 108, call it 109. The tier 2 ponds were moderately at 15 as an average, and the tier 3 ones were fairly low at 5.3. And this is kind of what we've come to see, is that tier 1, these ponds have definitely been impacted by something other than what you might suppose as a consumer product or in your home or through the septic system. This area here is probably what you might expect for a septic system, with low density impact. This is kind of like a medium density area here, but it's some of these levels are pretty high in this area. And so I'll tell you a little bit more about the tier 2 ones in a bit. But the PFOS levels, you can see that the PFOS levels in the impacted ponds was pretty was a good significant contribution, over 23% by its presence, and then 14% in this area here, which is which I think is kind of high for just a septic system source. And in the hinterlands here, you see 14% here, but it's really offset by this number here, Mystic Lake, that has a single PFOS level. And we don't know why that is, other than that Mystic Lake is down gradient of the municipal airfield there. And I don't know whether they ever used it there, but it's potential. That's why it's there. And then let's see. The other thing that I take a look at is the polyfluorocarboxylic acids, which are these things. It's a big term, but it kind of these are what you would kind of normally see with more kind of consumer type products, and or the 6,2-fluorotelomere type of AFFF. So in the tier 1 area in Hyannis, it's about 57%. In the tier 2, it climbs a little bit, kind of like you might expect with consumer products, and certainly for out here in the western part, which is just basically all septic systems. So it's very interesting kind of results here, and that tell a story about that are put together as described through the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 ponds. And below here are some of the ponds that were sampled by others. Flint Rock Pond with really high concentrations of PFOS. Mary Dunn Pond, down gradient. We have the Mill Creek, which is down gradient of both the airport and the Fire Training Academy, and Lewis Pond, which is on the airport as well. That is kind of a drainage. So those were kind of the high concentrations. If I go back to the map, these were the high concentrations at the sources sampled by others. And here's our tier 1, here's our tier 2, and here's our tier 3. So we also, as part of the study, we sampled all the public water supply wells in Hyannis, and we found PFAS in all the supply wells. And this is a chart showing the various different compounds that were detected, and how many times it was detected. So we sampled 11 wells. Well, we found these compounds in each well. And then we found kind of some of these compounds are lesser known, or attenuated, and are not present in really high concentration. So, but the PFOS was pretty high. Note to everybody, as I said before, all wells are treated to non-detect for PFAS at a capital cost of $22 million. That's spent by the team. And the O&M on these things is very expensive as well. So each one of these vessels contains carbon, which filters out the PFAS, and the carbon has a life of that may last, and some of these concentrations may be several months before it needs to be changed out. So you need a giant truck to come in and change out these carbon, and it's also a huge cost. These are the wells, and listed with the highest concentrations to the lowest concentrations. The average concentration was about 200. The ones down gradient of the sources, right down gradient of the sources, were the highest ones, with MD3, Mary Dunn, and the airport well, and the Mary Dunn 2 well, and then the Mar wells, which are down gradient of both the Fire Training Academy and the airport. And then we start to see them in also the Hyannis port wells, but at lower concentrations. And so this was basically the types of concentrations that was in the groundwater in May 2020 when all the water was being treated. But that's the concentrations in the raw water in the Hyannis area, as we've seen by the measurement of the ponds. It's high concentrations in the aquifer underneath the Hyannis area, the tier 1 area. And this is a map of the findings in the, missing a legend over here, sorry about concentrations are listed over here. And under 20 is these wells are still all under 20. There are some concentrations that are still even out here, which is kind of worrisome when we think about the EPA proposed regulation of 4 nanograms per liter. If that happens, then a majority of wells are going to need to be treated. So let's add to this story that I've been telling about the tier 1 and tier 2 ponds. And so the wells are pumping, and you saw what they're pumping. Let's call it 200 nanograms per liter. The water is pumped. This is the Hyannis water distribution system. So all this area is being served water from the supply wells that had in the past contained some PFAS. And this is the wastewater collection area here. So you have water coming, contaminated water being distributed, and then you have contaminated water as it goes through everybody's house and commercial area, kind of being collected, and it goes to the water pollution control facility. So these were just going back, and with the water table, we've got identified sources and a secondary distribution point here, in addition to septic systems. And let me get into that a little bit more. So we use particle tracking to show the flow of groundwater from the Fire Training Academy to the Mary Dunn wells. When they're pumping, it all kind of goes in there. The airport, the 2 sources here, the groundwater flows from the sources to the MAR wells. And you saw this storied history of the Fire Training Academy, and because of that, wells were turned on and off. I mean, back in the day when it was the Barnstable Water Company as well, if there was contamination, they shut these wells down. So these wells weren't always pumping here. So if we looked at the particle tracks and say, well, if they're not pumping, then the particles track and they go further down, and they end up over at the wells and even Mississippi. So the time of travel for this, though, is extraordinarily long. Could be up to 49 some odd years for it to get down to this area here. So that's most recent calculations on that. And the time of travel for this is about 3 to 7 years. This one is about 8 years, and this would be about some odd 3 years of time of travel for groundwater. And then this is a map that was done by the consultants for the town for the water pollution control facility, and they did particle tracks for 5 years. So if water that's distributed and discharged through the filter beds, kind of has this flow groundwater that emanates from it. And so this is just 5 years. So you can figure 5 years, 10 years, 15, maybe 20 some odd years to get down here, and maybe 15 to get down here. So this, if this was being, at the time, collecting the water from the service area that had PFAS in it, this would be kind of a secondary distribution point. And so when we look at this, we did this kind of a chart here showing, well, this is the distance. So this was the this was the water pollution control facility here, and this is the distance of miles, and this is the PFAS in the ponds. That the high concentrations in the ponds are closest to the water pollution control, and you go further out, and the concentrations fall. And I could also just kind of draw the circles around this as well. Here's tier 1, here's tier 2, and here's tier 3 over here. So the other part of this story is not all of Hyannis is sewered. So we have septic system returns, and so each black spot is symbolizes a collection of residential and commercial septic systems. And the average flow of these septic systems ranges from, as an average of 227 gallons per day. And one of them has a flow of 38,000 gallons per day. I'm not sure which one that is yet. I'm starting to look at this data set. And the estimated total flow is probably somewhere over the order of 400,000 gallons per day. So in the past, water supplied to these septic systems contain really high levels of PFAS. So it's not surprising now when you start to think about the tier 1 ponds, right, down in here, that not only would the discharge from the water pollution control facility be potential source, but all these septic systems. And so here's Aunt Betty's pond here. This is a whole slew of septic systems that are right up gradient of Aunt Betty's pond. Fawcett's pond, again. And then you come over here to the Straightway wells and the Simmons Pond, Hyannisport wells, and we have lots of septic systems over this way. And even some of these septic systems are up gradient of the COMM wells on Strawberry Hill Road. So that's kind of the story of what's happened, with PFAS in this area. And so in conclusions, PFAS from its primary sources, the contamination at the fire training academy and the airport impacted the supply wells and was subsequently transported by the water system and redistributed through the septic systems and the water pollution control as secondary sources. It just, and this is a story that, I've also heard from other places that are dealing with PFAS sources around the nation. The drinking water wells in Hyannis are now treated. So the water delivered to your house and anybody in Hyannis, commercial areas, restaurants, so the water is cleaner than ever. Okay, it's the town stepped forward and really dealt in this in a real proactive way. A lot of credit to them being able to put the financial package and political package together to do that. It was phenomenal. But PFAS, as it comes up as a topic, sometimes we say, well, PFAS is everywhere. But we have to remember that the concentrations in the Hyannis area were exceptional. And Laura Shader, who's coming on next with Silent Spring, I'm working with her on a project, and they're looking at trying to get residents who lived here in the Hyannis area in the past to get tested, blood tested for PFAS. I guess that's kind of the bottom line when we talk about health and what needs to happen, in an infrastructure way. We need to treat the water. We need to get that all done. But what about the people that have been exposed? And I think it's such a big problem. It's hard to grasp and get around. And there's lots of class action suits going on against 3M and all that. A lot of them are state, federal, municipal organizations getting in line to get kind of reimbursed for all the work and the infrastructure they have put in. But what have been the real health impacts? We won't really know but for studies like Silent Spring. And so the Silent Spring study was selected, as Laura will tell you, one of 5 in the nation because of the exceptional high concentrations in the Hyannis area. So she will tell you that they're looking for volunteers and for the word to go out to get sampled. I think it would be a good thing to have that as a case to apply, especially who knows where this goes further in courts. Anyway, there's a lot going on, and I think distribution of PFAS and that in the Hyannis area is a big problem, and it kind of transcends just kind of a single site investigation, either by the training academy and the airport. I mean, they have to do their work, and all that really kind of needs to be pulled together too. So as a regulatory roundup, the Fire Training Academy is preparing a phase 2 investigation. That's basically where's the contamination and how bad is it? And so they're now focusing on delineating the down gradient part of the plume, and they're addressing the ponds like Flint Rock Pond and Mary John Pond. And they're trying to track this plume, and we're hopeful that they're going to do it really quick. And because you saw that the particle tracks, that they've got a lot of area to look at. So presently at the Fire Training Academy, there is a down gradient capture well with a small treatment system that captures that hot spot plume that I showed you in the beginning, that red area. Also, the entire facility that you saw has been demolished and it's been capped. And so any of the PFAS that's in the soil right now is not being, that material would be actively leached from new rain falling on it. The county has recently committed to providing quarterly progress report meetings. And so it's kind of up to us to try to hold them to that. And then the remedial actions will be addressed after this phase 2 is completed in December 2023. They just submitted a status report in April of 2023. They only have to submit them every half year. Now, the airport, again, as I said, maintains that its 32 years of PFAS activities did not impact the down gradient MAR wells. Well, that's kind of beside the point, because now the recently detected plumes are now just adding to the PFAS impact at the MAR wells. So the airport has concluded its investigations and its remedial actions. And the finding is to let the present plume migrate to the MAR treatment, to MAR wells for capture and treatment as the best option. Trying to deal with this PFAS in groundwater is a difficult one, and but that has been kind of accepted at this point as the best option for dealing with contamination from the airport. And then also the DEP has technical assistance grants for communities to obtain expert help. It's often done by community groups. Could be done by any group that has some weight to it. This area club or Greater Hyannis Civic Association can apply for one of these grants. That it's pretty simple, and get some resources to hire some and get some expert help to help interpret what's going on. And this regulatory roundup, again, is I showed you that the regulatory levels are getting lower and lower. We don't know what's going to happen in 2023 with this EPA proposed regulation for 4 nanograms per liter. But there's other things going on. There's this unregulated contaminant monitoring rule that EPA is putting forth. All the water supplies are testing their wells for PFAS presently. Just talking to the Katuitt superintendent, he just finished doing that. DEP is requiring small volume well testing for all the little small volume wells that exist in areas like the Outer Cape, and then DEP is also requiring wastewater testing for discharges that have MPDES permits. Those are for permits that discharge into surface waters. So some of the big ones that discharge into the Blackstone River and so on and so forth off Cape. We don't have any MPDES permits on the Cape, I think, except for the canal, the Maritime Academy. And so there's lots of state and federal programs that have been beneficial to subsidize treatment costs. And Julian Sear has been working. They put together the PFAS task force. He was co-chair of that. They did a great job on that, and they're working to implement a lot of the regulations on that. So there's a lot of good things that are happening as we move forward. And that will conclude my little talk about what I know about PFAS in the Hyannis area.